On this important day for the United Kingdom in Europe and the world, let me repeat what I have said many times before, which is that as the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, we are not leaving Europe, still less are we leaving the world stage. The United Kingdom will always be a permanent and leading member of the UN Security Council, and as part of that responsibility, I have just chaired the Security Council this morning as its President for the month of March this morning on Yemen. And in my presidency capacity, of the discussions on, we heard from the UN Special Ismail Sheikh Ahmed. The Council was fully supportive of his tireless efforts to find an end to the conflict. We also heard from my Japanese colleague, who is chair of the Sanctions Committee, and we fully support him as well. The situation in Yemen is increasingly grave and distressing. Civilians are paying the highest price for the ongoing violence. Addressing the humanitarian crisis will continue to be challenging whilst the conflict continues. It's essential, therefore, to prioritise progress towards a sustainable political solution. This represents the only way to bring long-term stability to Yemen. The Security Council called upon all parties to engage meaningfully with the Special Envoy's proposals for peace and to make progress towards a ceasefire and an enduring political settlement. We also called for regional efforts to be harmonised. In the meantime, many parts of Yemen are already close to famine. This presents a huge challenge for the international community to confront. Today, we called on all parties to the conflict to do more to facilitate the humanitarian and commercial imports through all ports in Yemen, including Hodeidah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. It seems like peace talks and everything else in Yemen are stalled. Did the Special Envoy give you any new ideas, new efforts that he's making? And when you just mentioned regional efforts, what specifically were you referring to?
I think there's no absence of ideas, proposals out there on the Yemen peace process. What we need is commitment from the parties to engage with those ideas. He was, I'm sure he can speak for himself, but he was setting out the ideas that he has been putting forward for some time now. He was sticking with those proposals as the right ones around which the parties need to rally, but he did not display his usual optimism.
In your presidential capacity, what was the Security Council reaction to stepped-up efforts by the US in backing the Saudis' military campaign in Yemen?
Well, all of the Security Council members put forward their own positions, and what I've just read out is the Security Council's collective view. Of course, there are different emphases put by different members of the Security Council. In my national capacity, I can say the UK, like the United States, continues to support the Saudi-led coalition.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I have actually two small questions. One, did Saudi Arabia ask the Security Council or the United Nations to be in charge or supervise Al-Hodeidah port? This is one. And the second question, if Ismail Wuld Sheikh has a new peace plan before different from the one he submitted last October.
Well, on the big picture first, the proposals that he submitted in October have been updated since then, and when he talked to us previously, he set out the differences. On this occasion, he was not setting out a new plan. He was repeating what was in the existing plan and continuing to say that is the plan around which the parties in Yemen must rally in the pursuit of peace, which is what the people of Yemen need. On the specifics about whether Saudi Arabia has asked the UN or anyone else to provide oversight of the port of Hodeidah, that did not, in those terms, come up today.
Ambassador, can I ask you about Article 50? What practical effect does the triggering of Article 50 have on your daily interactions with other diplomats within the European Union, and I wonder what their mood is. One European diplomat put it to me that Britain has shot itself in the foot and the EU will now shoot it in the other foot. I just wonder, what have people been saying to you about how the nature of the negotiations over the next 2 years?
Well, first of all, as you know, Nick, the UK continues to be a full member of the European Union until the end of the 2-year process, which the Prime Minister triggered today. In that time, the United Kingdom at the UN will continue to fulfil our Lisbon Treaty obligations, which are to put forward in the Security Council common positions of the European Union where they exist, and to operate transparently with my colleagues from across the other EU member states, and we do that through coordination meetings, which happen every week. In the longer term, as I have said repeatedly, the UK is leaving the EU but is not leaving Europe. We're not leaving the world stage. Our presence on the world stage is in many ways represented here at the Security Council, where we were a permanent member of the Security Council before we joined the EU. We've been a permanent member of the Security Council as a member of the EU, and we will continue to be a permanent member of the Security Council after we leave the EU. So in that sense, there is no direct impact at all. I'm sure my colleagues from European countries can speak for themselves, but the UK continues to be a very active member of the Security Council. We see it as an important responsibility, part of our identity, and as the Prime Minister was talking about today, we are going to remain engaged on foreign policy, on security policy, on military policy, and one of the ways that we'll be doing that is here at the Security Council.
Okay, Benny. Just a quick follow-up on this. There's often in General Assembly and Security Council, when you carry a speech, you say stuff like, I fully associate myself with the EU ambassador, or with the Is that a formulation that you will continue to use?
I don't myself use it that often, although I acknowledge that I have used it. And as I say, the UK continues to be a full member of the European Union, and I anticipate that over the 2 years of the negotiation, the United Kingdom will continue to be completely aligned with the rest of the European Union. We will continue to work with the European Union member states very closely here in New York as well as elsewhere. Whenever there are positions of the European Union, we will faithfully represent them in the Security Council and elsewhere. And we will negotiate inside the European Union on behalf of the British interest, just as we always have done. And after 2 years, well, that'll depend on how the negotiation goes. But I would expect that that you will not be seeing a sudden change in the British interest. You will not be seeing a sudden change in British values. You will not be seeing a sudden change in the British position on most of the issues which come before the Security Council and indeed other parts of the United Nations. The UK will continue to be a permanent member of the Security Council and a leading player on international development, human rights, and everything else that the United Nations does. Thank you very much. Yes.
On another front, post-presidency, Ambassador Nikki Haley just proposed the first ever solely focused on human rights Security Council meeting. Do you support that, and do you think Russia will support that, and does anyone else have to?
In my national capacity, yes, I support that very strongly. I think one of the lessons that I have learned over my nearly 2 years here is that the Security Council is at our best when we bring in other voices and other factors, whether that's from the development world, from the humanitarian, or in this case from human rights. You cannot think about issues of peace and security in isolation from everything else. So I warmly welcome her initiative to really put human rights at the heart of the Security Council. Other countries can speak for themselves, but I will be arguing that the Security Council has an obligation to be assessing these issues regularly, and that's why I strongly support her proposal. The programme of work needs to be agreed by all members of the Security Council, so sometimes there is a negotiation about precisely what a debate is called, and I look forward to having that debate.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.